It's a very, very special day for India's military history. Today happens to be Rezang Divas. It was on this day in 1962 that the Charlie Company of the 13 Kumaon Regiment conducted India's most famous military last stand in the 1962 war against China. And these images from earlier today of Defence Minister Rajnath Singh paying tribute at the revamped Rezang Memorial, in which 120 Indian soldiers fended off more than 10 times of that number of Chinese soldiers during the 1962 war, a battle that is said to have been a turning point in many ways in India's defense against a much more powerful Chinese army. These beautiful images of Rajnath Singh, along with the Northern Commander, the Chief of Defence Staff, the Army Chief, and many soldiers currently deployed in a sector where India and China, it's a deja vu situation, are currently in a military standoff once again. But before I take you to our special tribute here on India Today, I want to tell you what the revamped Rezang Memorial is really all about. This beautiful monument in Chushul has been there for many, many years, but it's been revamped now, and that's the one that Rajnath Singh has visited. Let me tell you a little bit about it. The memorial was built to honor the 13 Kumaon Regiment. The Kumaon Regiment fought China during the 1962 war in Chushul. Major Rajnath Singh was the company commander of the Charlie Company of 13 Kumaon during the war. The original memorial was built in 1963, a year after the war, but it has now been completely revamped, refurbished. The memorial will have Major Rajnath Singh's auditorium. A memorial will also have a gallery of 20 Galwan Bravehearts from last year. So this happens to be both about what happened in Chushul in 1962 as well as the Galwan Valley elsewhere in Ladakh in 2020. India fought a war with China in 1962, and India is in a standoff with China for the last 18 months and counting. This is the story of 120 soldiers of the Charlie Company of 13 Kumaon, led by the indomitable Major Rajnath Singh, Paramveer Chakra, who held back over 1,300 Chinese soldiers at an altitude of 18,000 feet. This is a story of how every single Indian soldier fought till his last breath, till his last bullet. This is a story of guts, goosebumps and glory. India remembers 1962's bravest of the brave.
Battle of Rezang is one of the most heroic battles fought in the military history.
On 18 November 1962, the 13 Kumaon Charlie Company was deployed at Rezang and Chinese attacked in vain.
4:30 बजे दुश्मन का 7 प्लाटून के ऊपर हमला आ गया और आधा घंटे के अंदर ही उस प्लाटून ने हमले को नाकामयाब कर दिया। 5 बजे दूसरा हमला आ गया, लगातार वो तो दूसरा हमला वो भी उसने नाकामयाब किया।
After that, the third wave, which came from the rear of almost 1,000 personals. The Kumaonis fought very bravely, but they lost the battle after giving a huge casualties to the enemy and only 114 of us.
मेजर रजनाथ सिंह खुद बहादुरी के साथ लड़े और साथ ही साथ उन्होंने हर एक मोर्चे में जाकर जवानों के आत्मविश्वास को बढ़ाया.
He is the one who kept them all together.
उस पोस्ट पर 124 आदमी मेजर रजनाथ सिंह के अध्यक्षता में ये चीन को सबक सिखा दिया कि लड़ाई किस तरह की होती है.
Across the world, across all wars, if there is one battle that stands out to be counted amongst the greatest of all battles of all times, it is the Battle of Rezang and the bravery of Major Rajnath Singh, Company Commander, the Charlie Company, 13 Kumaon. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to be here at Rezang to recount the tales of valor of Major Rajnath Singh and the Veeraheers of the 13th Battalion, the Kumaon Regiment. Rezang. The name is synonymous with unparalleled bravery, raw courage, and country before self. A battle where soldiers of the Indian Army fought literally to the last man and last bullet against a numerically and materially far better equipped enemy, and yet did not let the Chinese army advance. Right behind me is Rezang. This is where one of the fiercest battles of the 1962 India-China war were fought. Look at the terrain. It's extremely difficult to dig into this solid rock and make trenches. But the Veeraheers, in that biting cold of November 1962, they did try and they did dig some trenches. Just tin for cover. They had Angola shirt and coat parkas. They did not have proper boots for this high altitude warfare. And yet, with their bolt action .303 rifle, they took on a numerically and weapons-wise superior army of the Chinese. But look at their valor, look at their grit and determination. They did not let the Chinese advance. Wave after wave of Chinese advances were beaten back. The Chinese did overrun Rezang, but could not advance towards Leh. The task was to protect the Chushul airfield at all costs. The orders were to defend the advanced landing ground. The resources were meager, only 120 men to protect the Rezang ridgeline. The Charlie Company of 13 Kumaon reached Leh on the 2nd of October 1962. They had just about a month to reach Rezang, their location, acclimatize, and then prepare their defenses. But Major Shaitan Singh, an experienced soldier, prepared his defenses well. He divided his Charlie Company, comprising approximately 120 men, into 3 platoons, number 7, number 8 and number 9 platoon, and deployed them effectively along the 2-kilometer long ridgeline.
As far as the Battle of Rezang is concerned, it is one of the most heroic battles fought in the military history. There were meager resources with the Indian troops. They were also limited in numbers, but in spite of that, they were determined to fight enemy who was numerically superior and also had better equipment with him.
It's not without reason that the Battle of Rezang is called the greatest battles of all times. Digging the defenses in the high altitude mountains was extremely difficult. The temperature in winters fell well before -45 degrees, and the icy winds pierced through their woefully inadequate clothing and shoes. Yet the Veeraheers dug in to defend the Chushul airfield. 124 Indian soldiers versus more than 2,000 Chinese soldiers, by any account, is an unequal contest. But here, in the battlefield of Rezang, the Chinese soldiers could not advance. Of the 124, 1 officer, 2 JCOs and 111 soldiers made the supreme sacrifice of their lives. But despite the post being overrun, the Chinese could not advance. And this goes to show that the Battle of Rezang was a victory for the Indian Army. On the night of November 18, 1962, the forwardmost listening post reported movement of some Chinese troops. Major Shaitan Singh was at that time at number 8 platoon location. He ordered his men to remain prepared for the attack. Around 3:45 in the morning, the first wave of about 150 Chinese soldiers launched a fierce attack. But the platoon was ready and opened fire at the Chinese soldiers as they came in range. There was a fierce gun battle and the Chinese were not prepared for such a strong resistance. The first wave of Chinese attack was beaten back. The snow was slowly turning red with the blood of Chinese soldiers. The Chinese then opened fire using heavy artillery. The Chinese artillery focused first on the command post bunker of Major Shaitan Singh and his light machine gun position that was bringing down effective fire at the advancing Chinese troops.
Major Shaitan Singh is instrumental in the sense that he is the one who kept them all together. Actually, we need to realize if at all we are put in a situation like this, to fight a battle like this, what happens? There is extreme isolation. Every individual is sitting in his own bunker, in his own trench, and he is fighting. He does not see other people around him.
After the second round of artillery attack, the Chinese charged again. The next wave was even larger than the initial wave of attacking soldiers. There were more than 400 soldiers who attacked from 2 different flanks. By now, the Charlie company was also running low on ammunition. Major Shaitan Singh ordered his platoon to conserve their ammunition and fire when the enemy came closer. The disciplined soldiers fired for effect, beating back yet another wave of the Chinese attack.
साढ़े 3 बजे वाइड लाइट फायर हो गया। आलम जी का लाइट मशीन गन का लंबा फायर आ गया तो कंपनी पोजीशन में आ गई एकदम से। कंपनी पोजीशन आने के बाद में ठीक तकरीबन 4:30 बजे दुश्मन का 7 प्लाटून के ऊपर हमला आ गया और आधा घंटे के अंदर ही उस प्लाटून ने उस हमले को नाकामयाब कर दिया। जब उसने उस हमले को नाकामयाब कर दिया तो 5 बजे दूसरा हमला आ गया। लगातार वो तो दूसरा हमला वो भी उसने नाकामयाब किया 7 प्लाटून के अंदर। उसके बाद में हमला बिल्कुल नहीं आया। 8 प्लाटून पर हमला आ गया जब टाइम हो रहा था करीब 6 बजे। बर्फ़ गिर रही थी, बर्फ़ नहीं रुक रही थी, बिल्कुल बर्फ़ गिरना शुरू हो रहा था। और वो हमला नाकामयाब करने के बाद में बम्बारमेंट बीच बीच में आ रहा था आता था तो इतनी तगड़ा आता था कि एक दूसरा पोजीशन पे जाने के लिए बड़ी कठिनाई हो रही थी.
Another company of Chinese army attacked Major Shaitan Singh's defenses, this time from the rear. By now, the Veera Heers of the Charlie Company of 13 Kumaon had been fighting wave after wave of Chinese soldiers for more than 3 hours. When our soldiers ran out of ammunition, they did not surrender. They got out of their bunkers and charged at the Chinese troops.
उस पोस्ट पर 124 आदमी मेजर शैतान सिंह के अध्यक्षता में ये चीन को सबक सिखा दिया कि लड़ाई किस तरह की होती है.
Naik Singh Ram Singh was a wrestler. When he ran out of ammunition, he jumped out of his bunker, caught hold of the heads of 2 advancing Chinese soldiers and banged them together, killing them on the spot. The bayonet charge of the Kumaon soldiers had a limited impact given the heavy, multi-layered coat parkas that the Chinese soldiers were wearing. A Chinese soldier shot Singhram in his head but placed an inverted rifle and helmet where the martyr lay. The Chinese soldier even wrote a note saying, "Here lies a brave Indian soldier." The soldiers had fought to the last man and the last round and did not let the Chinese army advance. The Chinese army, according to some reports, suffered more than 1,300 fatal and more than 1,500 non-fatal casualties. How can man die better than facing fearful odds for the ashes of his fathers and the temples of his gods? This place, Rezang, is a pilgrimage for every Indian to make. There is so much this nation owes to so few. Jai Hind.